The cost of loving him. She met Daniel on a rainy night. She always believed storms brought loneliness, but he arrived like a shelter. He offered her his jacket, his hand, and a smile that disarmed her. "You look like you could use some company," he said, and she let him in. At first, he was everything, charming, attentive, the kind of man who remembered her favorite tea and stayed up late just to hear her laugh. She believed she had found something pure, something worth holding on to. But slowly, his words began to cut in ways his touch never did. It started small. One night, she told him she thought he had forgotten to lock the door. He smirked and shook his head. "No, you're remembering wrong. I locked it. You always confuse things." She laughed nervously, brushing it off. But the next time, she told him she'd seen a message on his phone late at night, a woman's name she didn't know. He leaned close, his voice soft and poisonous. "You're paranoid. You twist things in your head. I would never do that to you." The more she tried to trust her instincts, the more he bent them. When she cried after an argument, he stroked her hair and whispered, "You're too sensitive, love. No one else would put up with you." When she found bruises on her arm one morning and asked him about them, he kissed her wrist and said, "You must have done it to yourself in your sleep. Don't you remember? You always bruise so easily." And because she wanted to believe him, because love had blinded her, she convinced herself he was right. Each time she doubted, he reminded her she was nothing without him. "You're lucky I'm here. No one else would want you," he said one night when she begged him to stay sober, begged him to stop disappearing for days. She hated those words, but she clung to him harder. Fear of losing him was worse than the fear of staying. That was the beginning of the gaslighting, and it never stopped. It became the rhythm of their life. Her questions, his lies, her tears, his quiet smile as he reminded her that she was insane. Then came the tea. Every night, he insisted on making it for her. At first it felt sweet, a ritual of care. But soon, each sip weighed her eyelids down like lead. She thought it was exhaustion from stress, from their endless fights. Until one morning, she woke with her clothes half torn, her body aching, and her skin marked with tiny punctures. She showed him her arm, her voice trembling. "What is this? Why do I have these marks?" He looked at her, calm as ever, and said, "You fell asleep on something sharp. Or maybe you scratched yourself. You've always been clumsy." She shook her head, desperate. "No, Daniel, this doesn't make sense." He sighed, pressed his forehead to hers, and whispered, "You're imagining things again. I'm starting to worry about you. You make things up when you get tired. That's why you can't trust your own mind." The words sank into her like poison. She began to wonder if she was losing her sanity. Nights blurred into days. Sometimes she woke in strange places, on the couch when she remembered falling asleep in bed, or on the floor with bruises she couldn't explain. She wanted to run, but each time she tried, he reeled her back with that same voice, that same smile. "You need me. Without me, you'd fall apart." One night, half-drugged but restless, she heard him leaving the bedroom. Something in her refused to sleep. She stumbled after him, down the creaking stairs, into the darkness of the basement. What she saw there broke the last thread of denial inside her. A metal table stood in the center, smeared with dried blood. Surgical tools were lined carefully along a tray, gleaming under the single dangling bulb. A cooler hummed in the corner. When he opened it, the smell of iron and rot filled the room. She staggered closer, her heart slamming against her ribs. Inside, beneath the ice, she saw it, a jar, sealed tight, floating with something red and human. Her vision swam. Memories collided. The missing time, the marks on her body, the dizziness, the pain. He hadn't just been drugging her to keep her quiet. He had been cutting her, selling her, piece by piece, feeding his addiction with her flesh. She made a sound half sob, half scream, and he turned. His face lit up with a calm, cruel smile. He didn't look startled. He looked relieved. "You weren't supposed to see this," he said softly, almost tenderly, as though scolding a child. In his hand, he held a syringe, the liquid inside catching the light. "But it's okay. You won't remember in the morning. You never do." She stumbled back, her whole body trembling. "Daniel, what did you do to me?" He stepped forward, voice low. "Everything I had to. You love me. You said forever. And forever means giving me what I need." Her eyes started to the tray of instruments. Without thinking, her hand wrapped around a scalpel. Her heart thundered. He kept walking toward her, his shadow stretching long across the floor, syringe raised like a dagger. "Daniel, stop." But he didn't. His smile widened, empty, hungry, lost to the drugs that had consumed him. When he lunged, she drove the blade into his chest. Once, twice. The sound of metal against flesh echoed in the basement. His blood sprayed across the table, dripping down onto the instruments he had used on her. He gasped, a wet, choking sound, whispering her name with his final breath, not in love, but in fury. Then he collapsed at her feet. There was a sudden, terrible noise, shouting, a chair kicked against the stairs, the kind of sound that rips through walls and wakes the whole block. Neighbors came to their windows and doors. Someone yelled for help. It was the neighbors who called the police. Frantic voices over the line, saying there had been a scream, a crash, the sound of something falling, and then silence. When the police arrived, she was sitting on the cold floor, drenched in his blood, the scalpel still clutched in her hand. She tried to explain the drugs, the gaslighting, the basement, the jars, but her words tangled in panic. To them, she wasn't a victim. She was a murderer. They searched the house. In a small locked drawer, they found videos and voice recordings. Daniel had kept his confessions, his justifications. In one, he spoke to the camera with a steady, hollow voice. She became so unstable. She was losing herself, talking to herself, forgetting things, becoming dangerous to herself and to others. What use is a life that's already broken? Better to sell what can help keep me from starving. The words were clinical, monstrous, a rationalization for what he'd done. He described her as too far gone, as though he had made a final, perverse judgment and acted on it. The recordings were his attempt to explain, to absolve himself in advance, but they only made the truth uglier. Now, she lies in a prison hospital, her body scarred, her veins full of medicine that is supposed to help her heal. Every night, she stares through the barred window, whispering to herself. She remembers his smile, his lies, his touch that once felt like salvation. She remembers the cage of love that became her nightmare. And still, even in the quiet, even in her brokenness, she repeats the only truth she has left. Better a murderer than his victim.